Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Wisconsin Agricultural Export Advisory Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 9 o'clock on March 29th, 2023. First off, we have the DAC and WEDC. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks everybody for being here and for the engagement on this issue. I know we have some folks joining us online as well. We're really fortunate and appreciative to have this group working with us to help guide our path on agricultural exports. DACAP and WEDC are working hard to implement our 5-year plan, and your guidance and discussions are critical. Having funding available through the last budget helped support companies that then had the opportunity to work to bolster their exports for themselves and for the state. And so we're very excited about that. We're also excited, and I mentioned this a lot, this is one of those things that happens more often than people think, but there was bipartisan support and agreement on the importance of this issue. The governor and the legislature agreed on this, and that makes me optimistic as we move forward. The governor has proposed funding for 2 more years for the Wisconsin Initiative on Ag Exports, which kind of funds this 5-year plan we have.
I'm surprised how quickly they started.
And then throughout the biennial budget process, we'll continue to have conversations with legislators and work to hope to secure future funding for the Wisconsin Initiative on Ag Exports. I know Mark and the team have some more details about where we're at, but it's great to see that we've had 2 straight years of record level of ag exports. And, you know, we're optimistic that we'll continue to see that grow over time. Something I wanted to share with this group that is pertinent to the work we do here, but I recently agreed to a leadership position for the as Secretary Treasurer of Food Export Midwest. So one of the valuable things about having conversations like this is it gives me some additional opportunity to share what you share with me, with my members in the Midwestern states. So again, I just really appreciate your engagement in this issue and the conversations we've had. And I will turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Secretary. As many of you know, this will be my last meeting as chair of the council. I'd like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I'd like to think that I've led by example, because Chippewa Valley Bean has been part of Export Tech. We put in our first IMAG grant application. I took planning a WEDC trip next month, and I took a trip with Food Export Midwest this last year. So these opportunities are available if we go get them. And there's a lot of them. And so anybody who'd like to talk about that, I'd be very happy to talk about it and our experiences. Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to say anything?
No, I really don't. We got a tight agenda today, and that's spectacular news. And I wasn't aware that you took advantage of all those things to personally feel the programs, and that's wonderful. You know, Wisconsin, I was at USDEC, U.S. Dairy Export Council annual meeting yesterday and the day before, and the dairy side exports continue to drive so much importance. I mean, right now it's 18% of the volume on a nationwide basis leaves the border, and 25 years ago it was like 2%. And I think that in the next 25 years we'll get to half. What we do here really matters, and I really appreciate the time and effort. You did a tremendous job as chair. You set a really high bar for anybody that would come in.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention in my welcome is, and this has come up in a couple of instances because we have terms. Your comment about leaving as chair reminded me of this, but for people who are appointed and we're on that 1-year first term, our intention is we spent a lot of time and energy getting this group of people together. We'd like to see everybody continue on. So if your appointment is up now as of the first year of the group, we'd like everybody who was in that first group to continue. We like the continuity. We've got some synergy and some energy going. So I just wanted to let everybody know that for those who are here and maybe who might be online. So sorry, I missed that.
That's a great decision.
Thank you.
That is wonderful news. I hope you stay.
I do. I will.
Good. This might not be your last time as chair.
Decision in my career life that to only accept one term at a time, because otherwise you end up as chair for a very long time. So, okay, back on track. Next is the roll call of council members. The secretary will now call the roll.
Thank you. For those online, please unmute when I call your name, so we know that you're participating. Brian Cummins. Jackie Fett.
Good morning.
Thanks, Jackie. Charles. Ryan, I know Ryan Wucher is at the US DEC meeting. Heath Heikes.
Sure.
Kevin Lips.
Here.
Larry Krieger.
Here.
Jeff Schwager's in Washington. Bob Fitzgerald. Craig Brees. Bob Wilson.
Here.
Brandon Bickham.
Here.
Chad Vincent.
Here.
Amy Radens. Here. Kevin Krentz. Representative Kurtz. And Senator Jeff Smith.
Representative Kurtz is on. I think his mute button wasn't working.
Okay, great. I see him on there. Wonderful. I know that Senator Ballweg and Representative Considine couldn't make it, so we do have a call.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next will be the approval of the September 23, 2022 minutes. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes? If anyone, does anyone have any changes to propose? Move to approve. Thank you. A second, please.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Did you move to approve?
Yeah. Yes, sorry, I should have announced it. Okay, the motion carries and the minutes are approved. Next is time for public comments. Member of the public like to make or to address the council? Anybody online? Okay, there's no public comment. Move on to the 2022 year-end export highlights.
Just bringing up the PowerPoint now. Public appearances. Out of our way. So the top line news is that it's another up year, not quite as much as we were from 20 to 21, but still 7%, so $4.22 billion. As far as we can tell, that's a record. Our data reaches back into 1996, and that is the highest level that we've had certainly since then. Pretty sure that that's for all time prior to that. As you can see, and the US overall was up 10%. So we've been tracking close to, or maybe a little bit behind overall US number, but it's still quite high. One thing to note, and as you see, we have a 10-year view on this, and just to show in the bottom line, the year-on-year change, the kinds of volatilities that you can see in our export number. It's a lot of products, it's a lot of countries. And so you can have some pretty heavy swings, as you notice. So from 13 to 14, we had a 17% up, 12.7%, can't quite see the screen well. But then for the next 2 years after, we had some pretty precipitous drops, a little bit of an uptick, and then back down again for the next 2 years. So some of those things are Certainly COVID had a piece of that in 20 in terms of stifling our growth, but really the retaliatory tariffs and a lot of that activity that happened in the previous years had a pretty strong impact on what our exports were, plus some other factors around the world. Certainly swine flu was a strong influencer in certainly the Asian markets and China specifically. Rolling into 20, a little bit of an uptick. And then as you saw, 21 was that really strong year once we were starting to get out of COVID and still some of that demand that carries on from following the recovery from COVID. We'll be hearing from our friends at USDA, the Economic Research Service, around their outlook, but they are projecting somewhat of a decline across that basket of products that they measure. Some of the wood products that we take a look at as part of our total number is not included in that, but they'll get deeper into that and actually some more information around the trade multiplier. So we'll look forward to hearing what their work is on their projections later. And let's see if I can make the slide go. So as we look at our top 5 markets, and they're a little over 2/3 of the total, Canada, and when your biggest market is up, and it's up double digits, nearly 15%, that's good news. And that helps to pull the rest up. China is down. Certainly the impacts from lockdowns on COVID that has been ongoing, the effect on their economy as well. In the crops area, they had a pretty significant drop, and we'll talk about that when we hit the individual product categories. Mexico, good to see that they're up. They had traditionally been our number 2 market, had fallen back over the last few years. They're starting to come back a little bit closer to what China is now, and we want our nearest neighbor to be a strong market for us because that is relatively speaking, one of the easier markets for us to be able to ship to, and especially for newer to export companies. Korea up well is also double digits. Japan flat, strong market for us, but I think the challenges mostly there in Japan are from those from the exchange rate differences. They've been hit with that a little bit harder. The dollar is pretty expensive in that market compared to some of the others, but that is going to be a challenge as well coming into the next year, is that strong US dollar against other currencies as we're seeing. So by product, we'll go start off with dairy. They're clearly the winner in this year, up nearly 32%. And if you look at all of the top 5 markets, each one of those is up double digits. Mexico, hugely up, so great to see. And that's across the board in these products. You know, Japan, that's a bit more of the packaged cheeses, the finished cheeses, the specialties. Mexico certainly that, but also some whey products. Korea, same thing in those packaged cheeses. China, much more in whey. Canada overall, even with the tariff rate quotas. So even with that issue with Canada still not quite opening up the market for distributors and food service. So it really, all that quota still goes through the existing folks who hold it, plus the processors of cheese, dairy products in the market. Then that can be a stifling effect on our exports. Aside from that, still we're able to grow in that market. And then all other markets together also were up considerably. So as you see that, interesting thing this year that the top 5 products, they make up the majority of the exports. Normally cheese and curds is above whey in terms of those 2 major categories. Milk protein isolates and lactose, some of those are a little bit further down the chart. We don't really export very much, if any, fluid milk. Butter is in there too. But the interesting thing is whey pulled ahead slightly from cheese and curds. And it takes way more pounds of whey to make that number. So, but significant, because think about not that long ago, whey was a waste product that went on the fields. So we're making money from whey. Making hay from whey. The top 5 countries are nearly 2/3 as we see. So those are important markets for us, but we're also looking to go around the world and build those opportunities in markets beyond those top five, as we'll see later on. In the meat category, and remembering that meat is, in addition to beef and pork cuts and sausages, prepared meats, it's also livestock and genetics, hides and furs. So across that, we're up, down 2% in that one, with mainly Japan being the strong influencer in that, since the top 5 countries are nearly 73% of the total. And I think the majority of that is just from that strong dollar and the impact that it has on those discretionary purchases, because those are all more the processed meat products that we would be shipping into that market, as opposed to hides, furs, genetics. And Canada, again, a major market, when they're down, it has an impact, of course, on us as well. As we've been seeing over the last year or so, Finland is up, and Finland is pretty much all mink. We're shipping more mink. It's good to see that. They were down quite a bit as you look from the previous year. That's been a real hit to the industry for a number of reasons over time. Certainly COVID hit that, some of the issues with some of the processors shutting down. 63 million, good number to see, great that they're coming back. That's still down from what their previous years were. They were looking more at about $100 million market. So still some room to grow in that, but it's good to see that that's growing for us. And one other point to make is, in addition to all those meat products, byproducts from meat, the rendering products are also important exports for us, and some of those proteins that are made from that and some of those other products. So just like whey, as we look at that as a food product and other uses, that is also something that we see across a number of markets. Crop products, so it's a big category. A lot of items are in that. Certainly grains, soybeans, corn, the milled grains products, but as well lumber and timber, semi-finished wood products, as well as products from plants, and beverages, ethanol being one of those major categories in that. So it's nearly 2/3 of all of our exports actually across that huge category. That's up about 5%, so good to see. Germany down. They pretty much import from us a category called odoriferous materials, which doesn't sound all that appealing, but actually it's plant materials that are used for flavorings and aromatics in beverages and other products. And so that's the major drop in theirs, but it's a relatively, as you can see, small market, but still an interesting, but wood products certainly into Europe are important as well. China, and as we mentioned earlier, that number down in China, as you see in crops, 34%, that's soybeans. It was about an $81 million drop in soybeans from year to year. So some of that's trade tensions that are ongoing with China. And some of that is, of course, just the economic issues. One of the other issues in China, it doesn't show up, the dollars aren't as large, but ginseng. China's been a major market for ginseng, and that as well has been a problem. There's still a 34% tariff on ginseng products. So we continue to battle with that. And part of our response to that is working with the ginseng folks to make sure that we're finding other markets for those products and the processed products. So important. And again, of course, lumber and timber, Larry could certainly speak to that China being a major purchaser of lumber products over time, that market has been down and continues to be, as we heard from the Lake States Lumber Association meeting not so long ago in the latter part of January. So it's an area of concern, but we're also looking at other parts of the world. The market isn't closed, but it's going to take more effort and time to get us there. And with that, what I'd like to do is turn over to, sorry, Keith, go ahead.
Yeah,
Back up.
no, thanks for this, Mark. Is there, is this detail available by product or anything like that?
By 6 digits of the harmonized system number. So we can really specific products, it starts to maybe not be available, but depending on the product, we can get you close. Bovine semen, for example, we're able to get that down to the 6-digit number. So we're able to, and we know that if it's Wisconsin, then it's pretty much for dairy genetics. So we can get fairly zeroed in on some items, some maybe not as close, but we can certainly.
Yeah, our trade association was asking if we had that available, so.
Yes, so I can send you what the output is. We use the US Census actually collects the data. It's the dollars, US trade data set. We have a platform that actually comes to us thanks to WEDC. They have a license on that platform, Wiser Trade it's called. So we pull the data through that. We can also show import data by various countries, at least to the last full year available. Like in a lot of countries is 2021. Some of them are up to 2022 on that. So we can also show what imports are, which when we work with companies in export tech, then Lisa and Shirley, Luis, Jennifer, all the team work with the companies to help them determine their top markets. And so some of that data is what they use to be able to help zero them in their top 3 markets. So absolutely, we can help to do that.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
So great. Are there any kind of rush through that? Are there any other questions from the trade data? This is available on the website. If you go into datcap.wi.gov, if you type in the word exports, then it can take you to our page. And then it's in the section that's called export statistics.
We can send a link
And
probably.
we can send the link out to everybody certainly to that. And we put these out quarterly. The information comes out about 45 days after the end of the whatever period we're looking at. So this data, for example, end of year was available in February. So we go out, we present to the board in a number of areas this information. We put that together, but then if there are specific product areas that you're looking for, then absolutely get a hold of us and we can help zero you into where that information might be and get as close as possible. Great.
Council members did receive the year-end results, that 1-pager in your attachments for the meeting. We're looking for that.
Thank you. Yes, that is in the collection of items there.
And will be uploaded again to the WIAE section of the DACAP website after this meeting.
And this presentation, by the way, will be available on the website as well as the recording. So, well, with that, what I'd like to do is introduce Bart Kenner, economist, trade outlook coordinator, state trade data coordinator from the Export Research Service of the USDA. And then as well, Wendy Zheng, and she's a research agricultural economist in the International Trade and Development Branch of the USDA's Market and Trade Economics Division. So a lot of the folks out of Kansas City and other parts of the country that do this work across all this data, and they certainly use some of the data that I mentioned from that source, but others. But with that, we'll start off with the outlook, and then Wendy will be talking about the trade multipliers. So what's the benefit downstream from all of that international trade. So with that, there's the slide. And Bart, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
All right. I apologize that that first portion moved a little bit faster than I was expecting. I've got a sick 5-year-old sleeping upstairs, and her mom has taken our 2-year-old to school, and so I'm listening in case I need to do something. But we've got some folks on the line who can easily take over for me if I have to jump up, and I apologize for that. Anyway, thank you very much, Mark. It was very interesting to hear all that detailed information that you all keep track of. And so what I'm going to do is give more of a 10,000-foot view of the year to come in agricultural exports. We're excited for the opportunity to share this with you. I am lucky enough to be joined by Wendy Zheng, who will share some of her work on the impacts of agricultural trade. And now we want to make sure to keep you all on schedule. to get to everything today. So if you would please hold all questions for both of us until Wendy has finished her portion of the presentation, we'd really appreciate that. Next slide, please.
Great. You ready for the next slide there?
Yes.
Thanks. Oh, keep hitting the wrong computer.
Oh, right. Oh,
Go.
back one. There you go. That's the one. So also online with us today are Dylan Russell and James Kaufman, who are integral to making the Trade Outlook report happen, as well as so much other agricultural trade work we do at ERS. Wei Zhang is my counterpart at the Foreign Agricultural Service and coordinates efforts there that contribute a good deal of valued analysis to the report as well. Next slide, please. So I'll be giving some info about the outlook for U.S. agricultural trade report, which I'll likely refer to as simply the trade outlook, and go over the exports forecast published about a month ago, as well as some information about tracking state level trade data, which sounds like has already been a topic of conversation. So hopefully I can shed some light on that. Next slide, please. The trade outlook really starts with the monthly World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates, or WASDE. This is a collaborative effort to report production use, trade, and stocks of major bulk commodities, animal products, and sugar. Analysts from the Economic Research Service, Foreign Agricultural Service, and Office of the Chief Economist work to produce these statistics and forecasts, which are then approved by the World Agricultural Outlook Board, which have one member for each of those commodities reported on to be the final word and say, you know, we agree with this. This is appropriate. And so in coordination with the Foreign Agricultural Service and Office of Chief Economist, we then use some information that went into producing the WASDE report, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report, and build on that, adding additional commodity group forecasts and regional forecast information. The trade outlook is then also approved by the World Agricultural Outlook Board. And the report provides macroeconomic overview and commodity and regionally specific sections for both exports and imports. Next slide, please. So first, I'll mention a few things that have happened since this report was released about a month ago, in the third week of February. So with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and others, financial market uncertainty may stifle consumer demand. And again, it may not. As Mark mentioned earlier, African swine fever, which there were some cases ongoing in 2022, but there have been several new cases reported in Asia, Europe, and Russia, and an issue that increased global demand for U.S. pork in 2019 and 2020, and beyond, as well as impacting feed grain exports, has affected countries, mainly China, work to rebuild their pork production. Now, with global economic growth slowing from the rebound that occurred across most of the developed world following the initial economic slowdown of the pandemic in 2020, not negative growth across most of the globe, but slower growth than we saw in 2021 and 2022. You can see on this chart that exports that stalled around 2020 shot up by $32 billion, or 23%. From 2020 to 2021, and then shot up another $25 billion, or 14% from 2021 to 2022, are now forecast to decrease 6%, excuse me, from 2022 to 2023 to 184.5 billion. Inflation beginning to ease into 2023 also contributes to this, as sharp export growth was helped by increased unit values across commodities over that time. And now those are starting to level off. We're not seeing huge drops in unit values, but the upward trend looks to be plateauing. Next slide, please. Here we have actual recorded exports of major commodity groups for fiscal year 22 in gray, and the fiscal year 23 forecast in green. As you can see, all major commodity groups except horticultural products are forecast to decrease from 2022 to 23. Grain and feed exports are forecast at 43.8 billion as lower corn, sorghum, and rice exports more than offset modestly higher wheat and feed and fodder exports. Oil seed and products exports are forecast at $43.4 billion, driven mostly by lower soybean and soybean oil volumes, which are only partially offset by higher soybean meal unit values. Livestock, poultry, and dairy exports are forecast at 40.5 billion as gains in pork are offset by lower forecasts for beef, poultry, and dairy. Next slide, please. Here I've pulled out a few commodity groups that might be of interest to the group. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm a bit limited by what is specifically reported in the trade outlook. So I won't have any detailed cheese or cranberry or bovine reproductive material data here, but I hope to give you enough information that you can find that shortly. Soybean export value forecast at $32 billion due to lower US supplies and higher competition from Brazil. Corn exports are forecast at $16.6 billion on lower export volumes. Export sales remain at nearly half the level of the same time last year, and demand for US corn has been relatively slow amidst competition from other exporters and relatively high world market prices. Fresh fruits and vegetables are among some of the only agricultural exports forecast to increase in fiscal year 23. Dairy exports are forecast at 8.8 billion as lower prices of non-fat dry milk powder, cheese, and butter in the last 3 quarters of fiscal year 23 are expected to offset the strong sales during the first quarter of that year. Hides and skins, including mink, are forecast at $1 billion of exports as weaker economic outlook is expected to impact leather demand. Now, I know I just talked about to a group test with increasing exports about how we're forecasting decreases almost across the board, but I just want to provide some perspective and remind you of the points I made earlier about the $57 billion and more than 40% increase we saw in agricultural exports from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2022. So that's the 2 numbers I mentioned earlier combined. So this 6% year over year decrease being forecast for fiscal year 23 doesn't come close to wiping out those gains for what that's worth. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but just showing here the darker green, the more export value is expected to go to that country or region, and the lighter toward the yellow, the less value is forecast. Gray areas are not specifically forecast as their values would round to 0 here.
Bart, could we?
Yes.
We've got some, if everyone who's online could mute, I think we got somebody with their mic open. So if we could. Hello? All right. Hang on a second, try to find the.
You figured it out?
Hear us.
I don't know. Well, some of these people are next now.
Yeah, I loved one just 2 weeks ago.
There we go. Seems like it was static. Okay.
You got it?
I think we're back. Let me just hear this back out again. Okay, sorry.
Sure. It's wouldn't be a virtual meeting without someone unmuted who needed to be muted.
It's a dog coming in.
Yeah, right. So I can actually hear mine snoring on the monitor here. Getting back to the slide, do want to note that almost 50% of our agricultural exports are forecast to be divided amongst China, Mexico, and Canada. Next slide, please. I thought I'd share with you all some of the resources at your disposal through the USDA and Census Bureau, which it looks like you're already making use of. The blue text here are all links that should be available to you after this meeting. Correct, Mark?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So at ERS, we have many trade data products, but here I've highlighted just a few. The Foreign Agricultural Trade of the United States, or FATUS data product, and the State Agricultural Trade data product. The Department of Commerce's Census Bureau has their USA Trade Online tool. I've linked it here, and I'll be going into others listed on the page in more detail, but USA Trade Online is a bit more involved as to how to pull the data and requires you to set up a free login account. So I'll let you all pursue that if you would like. And it sounds like the same data you're getting through another source that has a contract with the census to get that information sent directly to them monthly, I imagine. We have similar agreements with census, so somewhat familiar. And the Foreign Agricultural Service has their weekly export sales data and Global Agricultural Trade System, or GATS. Next slide, please. The FATUS data product is divided into three major collections. The monthly update for U.S. agricultural trade, which contains detailed monthly and year-to-date agricultural import and export data, reporting commodity volumes, values, and some import source and export destination country data for certain products. Then there are annual collections for fiscal year and calendar year data, making up the other two collections. These include over 20 tables providing agricultural and non-agricultural trade totals, top source and destination trade partners, processing levels such as raw products versus processed and semi-processed products. All of these data sets are available via downloadable Excel file. And next slide, please. The state agricultural trade data product contains two data sets. So the data set is a collection of similar tables. The product, I guess, is kind of has its own page. And so these are multiple data sets inside the data product page. The state trade by country of origin and destination data product reports the top 5 import and export products for each state and the top 5 countries those products go to or come from. Sounds like you all are tracking very similar data. The data is sourced from the Census Bureau, who compiles the information recorded by Customs and Border Protection at the ports. The raw data these top values are pulled from is available via CSV file on the site as well. The raw data at the state level is available from the USA Trade Online site, but one would need to enter their own product codes and countries and then aggregate that information to end up with something like what we have here. It's also worth noting here that the volume information may be obtained from USA Trade Online, but is not available in these data sets. This is all value being reported. One known issue is this data, which some of you may be familiar with, is that the information recorded at the ports or the border aren't always the most accurate in terms of where the products on the board were produced. They're technically recorded as what state the container was loaded in. This results in a lot of soybeans going out of Louisiana or Wisconsin cranberries going out of Michigan, I'm told. One way some smart folks long before I started at ERS thought to get a better picture of what exports came from what states ended up being the state exports cash receipts estimates, which estimates the value of exports of a given product group based on the farm cash receipts reported in that state. One downside to this approach is that we are constrained to the product groupings reported in the farm cash receipts data set, which is part of the ERS Farm Income and Wealth Statistics product, which I highly recommend if you aren't already familiar with it. Another downside is that we lose the ability to tie a state's exports to the other country it ends up in, because the method assumes that all export products go into one pot, if you will, And then exports are sold and delivered from that one national pot. Next slide, please. Another great tool that we use quite frequently is the Foreign Ag Services Global Agricultural Trade System. In addition to providing national U.S. trade data, one can select U.S. states as the data source to pull state export values and view by country and commodity. I hope you all have found this information helpful. And now I will turn it over to Wendy Zing, and I'll be happy to answer questions with the help of my colleagues after her presentation. Next slide, please.
Art? Hello, Wendy.
Oh. I will double check.
See if, maybe I'll check and see if she's.
She was on.
Shoot her a message.
I know we were looking to be a little bit longer at this point, so I think we maybe got ahead of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing her online here.
Well, if she's not, I will shoot her a message letting her know that we're ready for her. But if there are questions about the slides I just went through, be happy to field those at this time.
I mean, I have one. So Bart, it's Chad Vincent from Wisconsin Dairy Farmers. There's a lot of headwinds, but if you could just, if I go back to my board and farmers in the state, what's the best, what do you think the three greatest headwinds are going into this year, are going to have for this year's exports overall in ag?
So overall headwinds, you know, as was mentioned in Mark's presentation, the strong dollar is one that comes up pretty frequently as a expected overall headwind. As I said, kind of the slowing global economy. You know, looking at OECD earlier, I was seeing basically developed countries, and it's pretty much the same story across the board as far as what they have looked at and what they are expected to look at. And we provide some of that information as well in our macro section of the report. And gosh, a third overall headwind for exports for dairy farmers. James or Dylan, either of you all have any thoughts on that?
I have to think about this myself.
It sounds like you've stumped us.
You have.
I'll have to take a look. And certainly, Bart, I would think some of the trade tensions, you know, given the size that China is, trade tensions in China, the swine fever that's still out there, which impacts whey exports, I think has certainly an impact on it. And then, you know, Bart, when you mentioned, you know, if people got less money to spend because of inflation, because of, you know, issues in the different markets and the strong dollar, it's going to make all of our cheeses just, and, you know, those products that we're shipping much more expensive. So I think those, you know, as we're looking at it, those seem like some of the headwinds are going to be, you know, top of mind, and whether we're able to keep up with that 32% growth for the next year.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and one of the things, you know, you can get a sense for where things seem to be headed, but you know, one of the impacts that really tends to shift forecast is you know, policy and what remains in place and what changes are made. I'm not you know, definitely not the one to speak on upcoming policy for the department. So I'll let you all talk amongst yourselves on those fronts.
Absolutely.
We've talked
Bart,
previous times.
Yes, Felix.
sorry, my name is Felix Bacadano. I'm the branch chief of the International Trade and Development Branch. I apologize for Wendy's absence, but to not delay your meeting and proceedings, I could cover her presentation if you like, unless you have any more questions. I've been trying to get a hold of her through her cell phone and I've been unsuccessful, so I apologize for that.
No worries, Felix. And there is a question from Keith over here.
Just a general question. I mean, we've talked before some about some of the logistical challenges and well, I know we aren't necessarily affected by some of the West Coast thing, or at least I don't think, but we're still facing that. Is that still impacting exports like it was earlier?
Nothing like it was. I gather that you're referring to, the backlogs of ships at ports, like you said, on the West Coast mainly, and the very high shipping costs, low shortage of labor, a lot of things kind of coming together to really exacerbate that issue. And a lot of things have kind of come together to relieve that issue, lesser demand, as well as, all the efforts that were being put into place to staff up and build new containers. Some larger companies like Walmart and Amazon have actually started building their own containers and charting their own ships, as opposed to, relying fully on transportation companies. So a lot of that issue has dissipated. I won't say it's all gone, but it is much more freed up for those logistics to get things across the Pacific specifically, but elsewhere as well.
I would chime in there quickly. We've seen a lot of relief on the coasts. But interior, we're still seeing a lot of container and equipment shortages.
It's very difficult. Still.
Yeah, I believe that.
There was mentioned yesterday at the US DEC meeting that there was actually, talk about a major change, there are actually ships coming in empty to take exports on the coast.
Oh, really? Just the opposite of what?
The opposite. I mean, it's not every day, but there are, once again, the world dynamics of China and their consumer markets are changing. So this is going to be a roller coaster for a while.
And there's a message in chat here. Let me just check it real quick.
Looks like Wendy will be joining us in a few minutes.
5 minutes time. Okay, well, and maybe one thing, because we've talked about it here before, and I know Bart talked with you and Wendy before last week as we were prepping for this, that we're still struggling to figure out a way to at least take a look at volume shipments. I know, some of the trade data and the difficulties in doing that. But one of the questions that I think that drives, one of the reasons why the question is out there is what's the volume, is what impact inflation had on that growth versus, how much of that is inflation growth, how much of that is unit volume growth. And I don't know, maybe not at a state level, but at a national level, were you able to take a look much of that, or are you able to take a look at that?
Yeah, so definitely did look at that, and it is much easier at the national level for sure. Referring back to those data sets I mentioned, so one nice thing about the GATS system, that Foreign Ag Service product, is you can actually select unit values. Now, of course, once you go by state, all you have is value. You don't have unit value or volume. But yeah, so I, off the top of my head, know that the values were increasing, kind of along that same time period, 2021 and 2022 and 2023 overall, we're seeing kind of a plateau. And actually in cotton, which is one of the biggest by volume exports, we're seeing a pretty significant decrease in unit values, which those unit values have been spiked pretty high until recently. And so a big part of the story was inflation and increased unit values in those increases in exports. A lot of commodities, looking at them individually, actually remained a little flat or even decreased from, I'm going to say from 2022 to 2023, because I don't recall exactly, but that's the most recent data I've looked at. And so I know the increasing unit values were overcompensating for flat or decreasing volumes. And so as those unit values plateau or even decrease, the volumes, the story is going to kind of be uncovered a little bit as those values.
Bart, sorry to interrupt you. Wendy
Sure.
is logged in.
All right. And happy to answer more questions after Wendy's presentation if there's time. And I'm sure that her presentation will generate its own batch of questions. It's good stuff.
And we'll continue to bear down on trying to figure out how to get volumes and at least get some idea around at least some of the commodities on, how that tracks against value. And we all talked about that. So we'll continue to try to figure out a way to get that, in as reasonable a way as possible.
Yeah, I've got another note on that, but I'll talk about it after Wendy's presentation. I don't want to take her time.
Sounds good. We'll carry on here with Wendy once I figure out how to change the view.
Sounds good. Sorry about that, guys. I was expecting to present an hour later. So,
Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
running on San
Sorry.
Diego time. So,
All right. You're out of the West Coast. Again, welcome to the 2020s. Great. Well,
exactly.
it's queued up there, Wendy. So good to go.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting us to speak. Today, I guess I don't have video. Okay, so today we'll be sharing the economic contributions from our exports informed by ERS's agricultural trade multipliers. I'm Wendy Zhang, one of the contributors to the Ag Trade Multipliers data product. I wanted to mention one of the incredible things about working with the Ag Trade Multipliers is realizing how important it is for informing the public and the government about the benefits of trade for our economy and for creating jobs. So I'd like to look more into these statistics. Next.
Not advancing for us here. There we go.
It's not, okay, perfect. Before we begin, I want to note that the data from the Ag Trade Multipliers are for the calendar year 2021. So while trade data from 2022 is available now, other data required to calculate the multipliers are not available yet. So often the 2021 data is used as a proxy for the previous year or the current year, for example, 2023. You'll also notice that our chart is from 2020 instead of 2021. So the 2021 version of the chart is going through publication clearance at the moment, so I'm not able to share it with you today. But in a few slides, when I show this chart again, I'll be careful to explain what numbers you should be seeing for 2021. And this is actually a great way to visualize the growth in our exports and output from 2020 to 2021. So very quickly, this chart is a quick snapshot to visualize the economy and how it relates to the agricultural trade multiplier. The US exported a record total of $177 billion worth of agricultural goods, which generated an additional $190 billion for our economy, for a total of $368 billion that contributed to our GDP. The $177 billion of exports also supported the equivalent of 1.2 million civilian jobs. I'll go over the math briefly in a later slide, but we can express these statistics in terms of multipliers as for every dollar of agricultural exports, an additional $1.07 of economic activity is generated for a total of $2.07 of economic activity. And every $1 billion of exports is able to support almost 7,000 jobs. Next slide. So these were some teasers before I go over a quick roadmap of today's presentation. So first, I'll provide an introduction to the ag trade multipliers before jumping into what the ag trade multiplier data tells us about the effects of trade on the US economy through various lenses. We'll also look at certain industries. I heard Wisconsin really loves their cheese, and what the multipliers reveal regarding the benefits of imports before opening the floor to questions. Next. So I'll start with defining the agricultural trade multipliers and talk a bit about why they're useful to look at. So the ATMs, which is short for agricultural trade multipliers, allows us to measure the effects of agricultural exports on the US economy, in particular looking at the output and the employment effects, and specifically focusing on farm and food products. The methodology that we use is an input-output model. So without going into the technical details, I'd be happy to answer questions about that later. But this is an economic model that represents the interdependencies between different sectors of the US economy. So for example, say that China wants to export $1 billion worth of cheese from the United States. Your first thought is that this will bring a lot of business for dairy farmers who raise cows and produce cheese. But that's not actually the end of the story. This also helps the crop industry who provide feed grain for the cattle. It requires services from the packing industry. Farmers have to buy and maintain farming equipment for growing feed. So there's business for the manufacturing industry. Even the bank gets involved if loans are involved. So the banker gets paid when China wants to buy US cheese. So you see how the trade purchase might just be for cheese, but it creates activity and jobs in all these different sectors of the economy. And the input-output model helps us to measure that. Next. So that was a bit of definition and background. So now let's go dive into the data, starting with that first chart that I showed you. There was a lot of information that I didn't get to in the previous slide that I want to talk about now. First is the calculation of the multipliers. So it's pretty simple once you do it several times. So remember that we had 177 billion in exports and 190 billion in additional economic activity, for a total of 368 billion in economic activity. So we take the additional generated economic activity, 190 billion, and divide that by the export total, 177 billion, to get 1.07, which is going to be the overall agricultural output multiplier for additional economic activity. And then we also calculate using 1.2 million civilian jobs and divide that by 177 billion exports, that for every $1 billion of agricultural goods that we export, we require 6,939 jobs, which is going to be our employment multiplier. So next, I want to walk you through the graphic and how we can break the $190 billion of additional economic activity down into industry groups. So this blue stack of coins, this 150 billion, that was the amount of exports back in 2020. So this year we have 177 billion in exports. And then this generated additional economic activity, which is the multicolored stacks of coins on the right-hand side. So this purple stack of coins is the services, trade, and transportation sector. So in 2020, it was 68 billion, and this year it's, or in 2021, it's grown to 80 billion. And then the black stack of coins, which currently shows 41 billion for 2020, is now 60 billion for 2021, and that would be manufacturing. And then 32 billion is the green stack of coins, and that's in the farm industry. We picked green for crops. So 32 billion was in 2020, and in 2021, that grew to 44 billion. And then last but not least, so in 2020, 13 billion was in food processing, so the orange stack of coins. And in 2021, it grew from 13 billion to 17 billion. So pretty big increases across the board in both exports and the economic activity it was able to generate for the United States. And we've calculated these additional economic activity multipliers for each sector, but we can also do this for each specific commodity. So we can go down to a very fine level. Okay, next slide. Okay, so speaking of commodity-specific multipliers, this table also shows statistics for soybeans, corn, beef, cotton, and cheese. For cheese, for example, from the third column, you could say that every dollar exported in cheese generates an additional $2.08 in economic activity, for a total of $3.08 in economic activity. And in the second column, we can say that every $1 billion exported in cheese generates over 9,000 jobs. I want to point out how these statistics can vary quite a bit between commodities, and this reflects the different labor intensities required to generate a particular commodity. So for example, it requires more labor to produce cheese than to grow soybeans. The employment multiplier is a lot higher for cheese at over 9,000 compared to soybeans, almost 7,000. The additional economic activity multiplier is also more than doubled in the case of cheese compared to soybeans, and this reflects the higher labor requirements, but can also require the higher use of capital or packing materials, etc. A higher labor requirement, so I want to note that a higher labor requirement doesn't necessarily have a one-to-one correlation with the economic activity multiplier. So for example, if we look at corn and cotton this year, corn has a higher employment multiplier. It's 7,800 versus cotton 7,100, but it also generates less economic activity per dollar of exports at 1.11 versus almost 1.9 for cotton. So just want to make you guys aware that it's not necessarily they both go in the same direction and which one's higher. Okay, and then finally, there's a total of 124 different products. So here we've shown you 5, but there's a total of 124 different products shown on our website if you're interested in looking at other commodities, which I will link at the very end. Our next slide. Our next slide provides a visual comparison of the total economic activity, which is the sum of the exports and the supporting activity between the years 2021, our most current year of data, and the previous year 2020, with the current year 2021 shown first in the first and the third bars. So we saw a little bit from the chart how much more the exports and the economic activity grew from 2020 to 2021. So this is kind of another way to visualize it and broken down into the different sectors. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we've been talking a lot about how US agricultural exports help generate economic activity in the US beyond just creating the value of the exports and how it creates jobs for us. I'd like to switch gears a bit and talk about what we can learn about US agricultural imports from our data as well. So a common conception about imports is that they subtract from our GDP calculations. However, with our data, we can actually look at the bigger picture and show that imports actually contribute to GDP by encouraging economic activity. So for example, we might import cattle, but we feed this cattle with corn or other feed that's grown in the US, and we slaughter and process this cattle in the US, and that requires labor, equipment, and packing materials. So in total, the net economic activity generated by competitive US agricultural imports is positive. And this would be the total economic activity generated minus the import costs of the import goods. Okay, next slide, please. All right, before I close, here are a few ways to stay up to date with ERS research. We have a social media on Twitter and LinkedIn. We have a charts of note where you can find previous versions of the CoinStack figure that I showed in the beginning. And of course, our ATM website has a lot of information and data. So next slide. I'll include, so this is the link to our agricultural trade multipliers. If you guys are interested, the latest set of multipliers was released just this month. And okay, thank you so much to everyone for being here. And at this time, so I guess Bart's already answered a lot of questions, but I'm also happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Great. Are there any questions for the group? Wendy, just a quick question for you. If we take the Wisconsin data, understanding that, a lot of caveats, but if we take your multipliers and apply it to our $4.22 billion, then we get a rough idea of what the economic impact, the blended economic impact, as well as the jobs related. We would be able to do that. That's something that would be.
Yes. So for now, the best proxy is to use the national level multiplier data and apply it to Wisconsin's exports. And I think you'll get a pretty good idea. We are currently working on research that attempts to create state-specific multipliers. So yeah, I'll definitely let you know when we have more results from that, but you can get a pretty good idea using the national level multipliers, yes.
Great. So that, I think that's an opportunity for us to take a look and communicate. I saw some notes happening, I think, for all the groups represented, I think, to be able to help the broader public understand what the benefit from export is that's good and helpful information.
Exactly, I agree. I think the public really likes to see how, trade with other countries can help the US produce more jobs and, more income for everyone.
Excellent. All right. Well, if there are no more questions from the group, and thank you, Bart, Wendy.
I did, Mark, if I could, just that one note on getting volume, state level volume data. That USA Trade Online tool from the census that is linked in the slides. You are actually able to get state level volumes from that. Talking with the folks at Census and other folks who are very familiar with this kind of data, you've got, it's not whole because it's very difficult to track volumes that cross the border via ground. You just think about a typical, very busy border with trucks and things going through. There's a lot that is done hastily and a lot of things that don't get necessarily reported. So, but there is air and vessel data there for volumes at the state level on USA Trade Online.
So I appreciate that. We'll take a look at it. We have noticed from the data tool is that that if it's by air or by ocean, that information is available from the platform. But if it's, as you mentioned, on the ground, so rail or truck, bad news with that is that the vast majority of what we ship is to Canada and Mexico, which pretty much goes by rail or truck. So
that's how you're losing is Canada and Mexico. That's only 30% of all exports by our numbers.
But helpful to know, and we will continue to work with you all and some economists here in Wisconsin. We've been talking about this actually since the first meeting we've had to figure out a way to do that. So we'll keep chipping away at it here to get something.
If you all figure it out, let us know, and we'll do the same.
That's all right. Well, we'll keep in touch on that. Well, we appreciate the information, the effort, and it is an amazing service if you think about what kind of data is available that's collected, that's collated, that's reported on, that you all do at ERS in the USDA, as well as what happens on the commerce side. So we certainly appreciate that, and we'll continue to make good use of those tools.
Thank you all very much.
On behalf of ERS, I'd like to extend my thanks for the invitation, and also welcome you to reach out. We love partnering with our states. We have strong relationships with many states. Hopefully, this is the groundwork to set one in motion with the state of Wisconsin. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Felix. And I think that's a great idea. We do informational webinars regularly with this group as well. Information available to the public. So what maybe at the next opportunity, certainly with your next Outlook report that comes out around October, November, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That we can maybe check back in with you and see where things are at that point.
Okay. Have a good day.
Very
Great,
good.
thanks so
a lot.
much.
I appreciate your time and your work. Okay, great. And with that, I will remind myself how to do this. Yep.
I'm wondering if we want to take a break. I know we said at the last meeting it was helpful to take a break.
This might be a good idea. Yes, let's take maybe 5 or 10 minutes for a bio break.
All right.
All right, welcome everybody back to session. Next on our agenda is the USDA trade mission to Spain recap.
Great, I'll start with that. Both Mark and I were able to attend the USDA trade mission to Madrid. USDA organizes 6 trade missions to different countries throughout the year. Last year, Secretary Romanski went to the UK. Krista Knigge went to the Philippines, and then Mark and I were able to go to Spain. We have a wonderful, supportive U.S. Ambassador, Ambassador Reynoso. She was the former chief of staff for First Lady Jill Biden. She's very enthusiastic about promoting U.S. ag exports to the country. We had great overviews from both the U.S. Department of Commerce as well as Foreign Agriculture Service about the country and what's going well and challenges. We also had the Office of Agricultural Affairs out of Brussels represented there because Brussels is where they're doing all the trade negotiations between the EU and the United States. So we had a person there representing that office talking about what's been happening there. We did site visits. Mark was able to see the Congress. I went along with various commissioners, secretaries, and directors of agriculture, as well as heads of different commodity groups. So U.S. Rice was represented, U.S. Grain Council was represented, U.S. Livestock Genetics Export Council was represented, as well as Food Export Midwest. We had commissioners from Montana, North Dakota, Texas, Alabama, Indiana on this trip. And one of the visits I went to was to visit the Young Farmers Association, and I thought it was going to be an FFA visit. Well, it's actually people of our age at the table, but a very healthy discussion about lobbying and how the U.S. farmers do a really great job of lobbying and how they need to get into that kind of stream as well. But so it was a little, I was thinking we'd be dealing with, really, young college people, but it was a really great discussion and really great to be in the room and to hear their comments, a little bit of their criticism. I think we have to do a better job of promoting how we are sustainable in our agriculture and really promoting that message, because that's not what they hear. And I know an EU agricultural minister was here in the United States having tours specifically on that. But I know that's part of a message that we need to do a better job of conveying to our customers and to foreign governments. A meeting I got to sit in on was the Spanish Food and Drink Industry Federation, and they were reviewing their initiatives of their Farm to Fork initiative in 2023. I think we all know it's really difficult to export food products to the EU, but there's some things that are coming up that will make it even more difficult. These were sent to you in your email as an attachment. But some of the things just to say labeling of beverages with alcoholic content, they'll now have to have a health warning on that. Ireland is making that change. Another thing that will be difficult for anything using packaging using reusable packaging. So if you're selling the distilled spirit, you'll have to find a way to take back that empty bottle, clean it, wash it, and reuse it again. And even for Spain, they're going to find it very difficult when they're shipping their product within the EU to get that product back to reuse it. And so they're feeling a little bit of being, they see that France and Germany are kind of leading these new initiatives, stronger partner maybe, and even the other members are feeling like, you know, this is going to be very difficult for them. Not sure how this will all turn out, but this is what's being discussed in the EU. So feel free to read through these. I made some notes on the copy that I sent. Maybe you can't read what my notes were, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to explain what's going on there. But it's just interesting information for all of you exporting a food product with a label. So there'll be challenges ahead. So we'll be monitoring that. Maybe we could have our OAA Office of Agricultural Affairs in Brussels actually do a webinar on it for us sometime, because I think it's something we all need to do.
That's actually a good idea, because if you look at their new regulations coming forward, not just on their farm to fork, but also plastic packaging. And the taxes that they're paying on it, they're going to want to ship it back to everybody who uses any kind of plastic packaging. If they ship it out, they don't have to pay that tax. Just be aware. It's going to get even more gnarly. Any other questions for Lisa?
Well, Mark, you want anything to?
And I'll just add to that. These USDA trade missions are beneficial on one level for us, so we understand the market, get access to meetings that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do if you're just coming in as a smaller group. It's also beneficial for the companies who participate. Typically, there are Wisconsin companies participating on these. In this case, there wasn't a direct participant in the buyer's mission, because the structure of these missions is there's a government track where the folks from the states are meeting with their counterparts, getting market information. There's a company track where they're meeting with prospective buyers, importers, distributors, end user customers. That's done in a speed dating sort of style in a large ballroom. In fact, when we do our trade mission to the UK in June that Randy is leading, we'll have that same approach. They'll be in both London and Manchester, a means by which that the people participating in that mission will be able to meet with their importing customers. In the case of Spain, and that Portugal was part of that, the two of those markets together is about $39 million last year. So that puts it about 15 in total. So it's not necessarily a small market for us, not one of our top 10, but certainly important if you think about what the impact of Brazil has for us, for example, in our exports. It's a different mix of products, and we are, as we'll see in a little bit later here, that we are doing some activities in Spain focused largely around livestock genetics, feeds. So on the agricultural side as well, there's an opportunity for lumber products in that market as well, and there's a major trade show. So as we look forward, Spain is one of those destinations that we'll be doing some more work in. In this particular meeting, and the reason why that picture of me with David Clark, it's not because he had a Tennessee bourbon there, but because the product that we're pointing to is a product that they developed that they're exporting to the EU, and they started off in the UK as well. Now that UK is not part of the EU, it's a Tennessee cream, they call it. That Tennessee cream is their whiskey product with a cream, and the cream comes from a company in Neenah, Wisconsin that specializes in beverage cream. So in some way, shape, or form, we were there with the product, but as well, when USLGE it participates in those US livestock genetics export, are representing, of course, all genetics products across the US. But when they talk about bovine genetics for dairy, that's pretty much Wisconsin. They'll talk about everybody, but that is a benefit to Wisconsin specifically when they're participating on those. So those are product opportunities, and we look to help companies to access those. There were funds available from Food Export for a designee of the secretary to travel, or the secretary. So in that case, I was the designee to be able to make use of those federal funds in order to gain those opportunities in those different markets. And sometimes in markets where we wouldn't have as much opportunity to go otherwise, or to be able to prospect there. So that was part of the reason why we went to Kenya and Tanzania before, as we talked about in the last meeting. So those are beneficial activities that we look to try to continue to work with. Some of the benefits and why Spain maybe could be the question, but that is another market for us to be able to take a look at for those specific products. And certainly those craft spirits, craft beverages that we do here, another important area for us in the EU overall and in the UK when we go.
Thank you, Mark. Next is the Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports 23 Finance and Year-to-Date Results.
Excellent. Now I'll start with the team because this doesn't happen without the people you see on the screen there. Jennifer Liu and Luis Santana. They work with the livestock genetics, animal feeds. Jennifer has some specialty as well into forest products as well as ginseng in those areas. And then Lisa, as you know and see here, and Shirley Acedo, they're working with the packaged processed foods, pet foods, ingredients. And we split the world by products as well as by geographies, as you see there. And then a new member of the team, Amy Kennedy, has come on. She's limited term or LTE with us, so not full-time, although we could certainly make use of every minute that she has, which is to help as the trade promotion activity coordinator. As we're going to these various markets and literally having at least one, if not two people out every month on some activity, and you think about doing a trade show, doing a mission, doing inbound buyer missions, and the amount of forward work that you need to do with that. And essentially while they're traveling, they're also working on the next thing that's a month or 2 months or 3 months ahead. So to have someone to help us keep the wheels on the buggy is important and for us to be able to execute on this plan, because from the start, WIAE, the approach is both the federal funding sources that we've been using historically from Food Export, from USLGE, from Softwood Export Council, and as well as from the STEP grant funds that come through WEDC, as well as now those WIAE funds in order to help us. And as we heard about, when we see the headwinds for 2023 coming, and we have that 25% growth goal at the end of 5 years, we need to be pushing hard on every one of these markets to make sure that we are out there in front of the customers. And by we, I mean all of the companies who we're helping to get in front of those opportunities, whether we bring them here or whether we go there to see them. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone saw the team and recognize that they are doing excellent work, and we appreciate the fact that they're here doing that for us. So just quickly to go through where we are January to June in our activities. It includes both WIAE and the other activities I mentioned. So in March, came back from VIV Asia, 9 companies. One organization was also with us on that to help promote the Wisconsin livestock feed genetics products. Cial Americas in Las Vegas, actually Shirley Acedo this week is there with the folks from Dairy Farmers Wisconsin and that stand, and helping to certainly respond to the international prospects. That Cial show is the main show started off in Paris, but they're branching out globally as well. So that's a relatively new show in the US. A lot of interest, 2 Wisconsin companies specifically, but actually several more are exhibiting at the show. I don't know, Chad, if you.
I don't know exactly the names, but I do know that there's great activity, and we have a booth there and brought a couple of processors along as well. We'll see how it goes and whether this is a long-term US thing or how it'll go. But it's great to have Cial come here.
Absolutely. And it's a draw, not just for the US market, but for certainly in this hemisphere.
If it doesn't bring people in from outside, then it's not, then it's just another show that like we already have. So this thing, to me, the gauge is how many people from outside the borders are going to come to Vegas to attend this.
So we'll see what the results of that. And of course, we'll be reporting on that as we go in our future meetings here, as that's happening right now. Food and Hotel Asia, that's a food export show. Lisa is leading that activity with 5 companies. SIAM, Siam, in short, that's an agriculture show in Morocco, relatively new market for us, but we have some great opportunities in that. That started from a spotlight presentation that USDA did more than like 2 years ago. And beginning to see what those opportunities. Actually, Luis has some experience in that market previously in feed products when he was in the private sector. So to continue to look at that market as an opportunity for us as they're looking to grow their indigenous industry and to separate a bit more from what they've been receiving from France and from Europe. So for the US to get a bit better foothold in that market and to make sure that we're part of that foothold. Zoom, the Wood Show, and I know Larry, you're planning to be part of that. Those 4 companies who are going on that show, so that's great. And this is an opportunity we've not had previously to be able to do. So I think that's going to be an interesting opportunity to do that Wisconsin Pavilion there. And then the following up on that, inbound wood buyers, and that comes from activities that have come from a number of shows and work that Jennifer has been doing. And we're looking at visiting, 11 companies, 12 companies will be visited by buyers from Mexico. We're looking at 4 buyers from Mexico, 2 buyers from
Taiwan.
Thank you, Jennifer's online. Thank you, Jennifer.
1 from Taiwan, 2 from Taiwan, 1 from Thailand, and possibly 1 from Vietnam. So it's a group of international buyers visiting 11 to 12 Wisconsin wood exporters.
Mark, you know that DFW brings in people from around the world on these things as well as domestic. We do like 25 domestic every year. Wow. So as you guys do these, if there are new people involved with this and they want to have it, we'd be more than happy to sit down and just walk through some of the things that we've learned over the years of handling these things. So
absolutely, yes.
We're more than happy to help with anybody that does these things, because we have a dedicated team that does really nothing but these now in person and also the virtual, what we've learned. So
excellent. We'll certainly draw from your experience, because I think that is certainly a skill, to hone that in.
We can explain a lot of the mistakes we made. So hopefully we don't have to learn through pain.
We'll learn through your pain. Yes. Thank you. So that takes us into June. So as we get close to the end of the fiscal year, as we mentioned, Spain, that there are 2 major shows in Spain. That's Semana Verde is one of them. There's Cima Gandagro is the other one. But in this year, we'll be bringing Wisconsin livestock and genetics feed companies to that activity. We're recruiting that for that, still looking for 4 or 5 companies. So certainly if that's a market of interest amongst either yourselves or folks that are within your groups, we're open to making sure that we have that filled out. That'll be a pavilion. The Siam show in Morocco is actually a genetics conference. We'll be talking about genomics. And we have a space for a few then the genetics companies to then exhibit as well. So we're looking at 100 to 200 potential buyers, producers out of that market to be able to go to that one. This one is more like a standard a trade show pavilion, like we're doing it at InterZoom, for example, in Cologne. And then we finish the year out, fiscal year that is, with the Secretary-led trade mission to the UK, London and Manchester. We've got 6 companies planned. We've actually got a room for 1, possibly 2 more companies. So still time to jump into that. We've already gone through the recruiting period, but we'll hold it open a little bit. You do need time for the local contractor to be able to identify the prospects, tee up those buyer meetings that we'll be having in those 2 locations. but certainly an opportunity across those range of products. And we do have some cheese companies going with us, actually. It's not the easiest market to sell to, but there's also interest as the UK starts to look more toward North America for supply. So those are all activities that we're running. So now we'll speak to the budget and the dollars that we had. So the original budget had $110,000 in the International Market Access Grant and Export Tech, and then around $200,000 in export expansion grants under the WIAE funding that's also termed as appropriation 302. So, and then the major amount of that, the rest of that balance of that was to go to trade promotion activities. But from the start, we knew that these are flexible categories. We had the ability to be able to move between those because in the case of the International Market Access Grants, and that application period closes on the 1st of April. So there can still be some grants coming through. I know that all of us have been reaching out to the different companies to put their application in for that. They go through the underwriting process and then are awarded the funding. So that number could increase, which will then adjust the trade promotion activity number. The export expansion grants, we have awarded already 7 organizations under that. So we're very close to the $200,000 for that activity, for that section. They're going through the contracting right now. Those are 2-year grants cycles. So they'll be starting their projects here and covering for the next 2 years. The first round, of course, we did already. So those projects have already gone through their 6-month report. A number of people are reporting in and having some activities, but those will continue on as well. So we've got those ongoing. So those numbers can shift in terms of what people actually spend on their activities and their abilities to. And then the list above is what we have planned for the year in those trade promotion activities. As we finish out the fiscal year, and then we do that accounting afterwards, and those numbers are going to shift. But this is a snapshot right now as to how those. And I guess the major point is that 558,400. If you think about the time available for us to organize those from March of essentially March of 2020, what year is this? 2022 till now, 2023. Then we had all the 22 activities, and this is what we're doing in 2023. So as you can see, the team is highly motivated to make sure that if we have the funds, we have the resources, we put them to use.
Thank you. I mean, it's an amazing amount of work to be pulled together in such a short period of time, and an amazing amount of work to get done for $500,000.
Thank you. And we're leveraging federal funds, but we're also leveraging the support that you all provide for us and the organizations that are involved. So we do appreciate that. And thanks for the recognition.
And one of the things I would inject here too is that I mentioned on the front end that there's been a proposed ongoing expenditure for this that the governor put in the budget. The other thing that is included in there is a little bit of additional funding to kind of catch us up to the level of expenditure we hope to see next year, the year after that, the year after that. The original goal and intent by all parties involved in this discussion was to try and see like $5 million over 5 years. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to kind of work with our legislative colleagues who've been very helpful with this and try to see if we can have that level of funding moving forward.
Thank you, Randy. So speaking to that, so there is and you need to
I do.
get on your way.
Thank you all very much.
So,
Appreciate it.
Very good.
Being here, Randy.
Yep.
So the dairy grant funding, that comes from some previous funds that actually had been on our books for some time from a value add dairy innovation grant from some federal funds and some other dollars also from federal, a loan program, origination fees and some interest from that. So those dollars then were committed to specifically grants and specifically for dairy, growing dairy exports. So that funding is under appropriation 320. 883,191 is the dollar figure, just that what became available. So we want to make sure we use those. We got the approval from the feds to be able to do that, and then as well from the legislature. So just to recap where we are with that, fiscal 23, right now, there are $35,000 associated with that. From that funding source for international market access grants. These are grants to dairy processors. There may be, again, some more dollars coming into that, depending on how the applications come through as that closes out. In a lot of cases, you know, folks are holding off until maybe close to the deadline date to submit. So when those applications are received, we'll find out early next week, actually, from WEDC, then what the final number was on those. But at least standing right now, it's 35,000. In export expansion grants for dairy, in round 2, we increased the total dollar amount available up to $100,000 for dairy, a specific, that would be dairy products, cheese, whey, all of those products that we're talking about. That was 483,980. That's an estimated number, just because roughly we're thinking 5 direct impacts to companies. It's likely more, but to have a safe, reliable budget number to work with, we're thinking 30 companies will be directly benefiting from these activities that are undertaken by these grants. And then in fiscal 22, if we roll up the international market access grant, the export expansion grants, and Export Tech funding, which in 22, actually, we did not utilize Export Tech funding. 23, actually, one organization is using that, that's available for agricultural producers. But in this case, 287, so that total ends up being $806,000. So that leaves us 77,000, a little over $77,000 remaining. Again, that's for dairy export grant funding. So those dollars would be applied to future international market access grants. So we'll continue to make sure that we consume that support, that resource for that purpose, and feel confident that we'll be able to do that. So just wanted to give that picture of WIAE funding, and then as well that dairy grant funding. 2023, and just to talk specifically about grants. So we have 5 companies who've applied right now, 3 under the WIAE, 2 that I just mentioned under the dairy grant funding. So that's a total of $87,000. It rolls up to 40% of dairy, 60% crop, not as many meat grants so far in those broad categories, but we'll continue to work on that to make sure we have that balance as best as possible. And then export expansion grants, 9 organizations in fiscal 23, 6 under dairy. So certainly a lot of help from Dairy Farmers Wisconsin, from Wisconsin Cheesemakers, from a number of the groups to be able to help us get those dollars and to that point out to those organizations doing that work. And then 3 organizations working on meat and crop, meat under livestock and genetics, Keith Paulson doing that work. We'll see those in just a second. But in any case, and because of that specific dairy grant money, that's why the percentages roll out as you see when you roll that all together, 70% dairy, 15 on crop and meat roughly. And we do have one awardee, actually a mink processor, a mink grower rather, that's taking advantage of that Export Tech plan. But we want to make sure that more companies on the producer side who've not been they've been able to take the course, but there have been some, or that program, some challenges with the folks offering it if you're a producer and not a manufacturer. And we've helped to top that up.
Yes. So just clarification, do they have to be a manufacturer to qualify for that, or is that?
They do not. They can be a producer. And actually, we've worked with University of Wisconsin Stout, UW Stout, and their manufacturing outreach center. They will be the ones to focus on the producer Export Tech sessions. They do at least one, sometimes two sessions per year. Plus, we can also work on having a standalone session if we have enough companies. You need normally 3-4 companies at the minimum, ideally 6, to be able to go through that among the producer group. It's a bit more specialized, as you know, with producers as opposed to the processed food products. And so the WIAE supports will help so that tuition is the same whether you're a manufacturer or you're a producer, an agricultural producer. So we can, anybody who's interested in that, we'd like to work with them on that. The advantage of Export Tech is that it qualifies you for $25,000 per state fiscal year, and to be able to access that 6 times in the state versus the basic level of Export Tech or International Market Access Grant, which is $10,000 3 times. So it's $30,000 versus $150,000 of total support.
The next session for the UW Stout Export Tech starts in May. So if you have anybody who's interested that might want to go through that, and Charles has gone through that program.
I was just going to say it was a very valuable program, even from an experienced exporter. I was able to view things a couple different ways. I learned of a few different informational sources that I didn't have before. And of course, it qualified for the larger IMAG grant.
And I think the benefit, in addition to the fact that you have the reason that the rationale for why there's more dollars available is because that program helps companies move further, faster in their international markets. You choose your top 3 markets, you build a strategic plan around how you execute in those markets. And in many cases, companies who've been exporting for years don't necessarily have those strategic plans specific to international. So to be able to go through that process, and I think, Charles, you can speak to that, and you get to hear from your peers too, how they're approaching it. So can't say enough.
Questions or anything like that, I'm happy to.
Absolutely, a great resource, and from a producer standpoint as well. So not just a packaged products, folks.
One thing that, I'm sorry, other thing I would say about that is I was there with Ellsworth Dairy and what's the name of the paddle company? We had this broad range, and it just gave some other views on how to do things. Yeah, a boot scraper, absolutely interesting. And I got a free boot scraper.
Add that to the benefits.
And Branch's paddles. I mean,
Branch's,
paddles are works of art. They're kayak paddles, and they're concentrating on the Scandinavian market, at least in their plan. And then Croy Valley Foods was in it too, and they're a barbecue company and seasoning, and they're just going all over. It's really quite exporting.
Well, it was different because, you know, I'm used to doing bulk, and then looking at how boutique singular manufacturers or processors do things. It just gives you different ideas on how to enter into different markets. Can't recommend it enough.
Excellent, thank you. Just real quickly, the export expansion grants, as I mentioned, these are the groups who've taken it on for this round, as you see, and some of them have the previous round, which it was, in fact, we designed the program that way so you could go, you know, to do a second round. So Dairy Farmers Wisconsin, the cheesemakers, PDPA, they're a new group to this, the professional dairy producers, CDR. UW River Falls has a different one around dairy. This one also dairy, but Carolyn Brady out of that group is working on bringing dairy companies into different markets and partnering in some cases with the UW Madison folks on the livestock and genetics part of that. So from producer to finished product and those imports. World Dairy Expo, and it's the opportunity there, frankly, is to help promote that show globally, so that we get a stronger international participation than we do already. And I mentioned the UW Madison and around dairy genetics. That's from the lab to really help the buyers understand the quality of the genetics and the testing that we do here, and to help reduce some barriers in other markets. Wisconsin Beef Council. And helping those buyers understand the quality and as well the sustainability message from from Wisconsin beef, and then the Wisconsin potato and vegetable growers. And their work certainly take advantage of the opening market in Mexico, as now those fresh potatoes and seed potatoes are able to go further south, but also other vegetable products that are produced, here in Wisconsin. And we're quite strong in a number of those products beyond those potatoes and cranberries, which we hear a lot about, but certainly a number of other areas. So we'll look forward to see what those projects do once they kick off. As I said, they're in the contracting phase right now. Once those get solidified, then they'll start to move and execute on those projects that will go over the next 2 years, with an option potentially to go to a third year if needed in terms of executing their projects.
And Mark, the application, just a question, the application process for FY '24 then will be at what point?
So this program, we had 2 years, 22 and 2023 for the export expansion grants. And that goes to nonprofit organizations. So that's right now, at least as we're sitting with the funding available, then we only had anticipated 2 rounds of that because with a 2-year life up to 3 years, and we have a 5-year under WIAE, then we figured we better do it on the front end so that they could get the project started and then things complete by the end of the 5-year. In the case of the International Market Access Grant that goes to companies, that's an annual application process. First come, first serve approach. WEDC opens that up typically in August. And then that application runs all the way through until April. So you can apply at any point during that time. If you apply, let's say in April so it starts in August of 1 year because it spans the state fiscal year. So if let's say you applied in April or in like this week, then you would have until December to finish your project, and then until March to turn in all your documentation of materials for reimbursement. So it extends beyond just June 30th of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I was thinking in the context of the Trade Association for Genetics was interested in possibly something like this, which is a nonprofit organization.
Sure. And so one of the things we would connect you with UW-Madison Pulse, and I'll take a look. I'm trying to remember the previous grants on that. And there's also another opportunity as we look at this, because we've got yet 3 more fiscal years in this WIAE program. If there's an opportunity to do one of these grants, we would have the mechanism to be able to do that. But there's also a grant called the Collaborative Market Access Grant that WEDC offers to organizations to help multiple companies. So there may be an opportunity through that mechanism as well. So we can talk a bit more about
some connection with that.
Absolutely. So we should talk about where those opportunities can be. So there are a few different approaches that we can take to do that. So just a quick roll up as we look at, again, snapshot fiscal 22, fiscal 23, where we're at right now. Just the two years rolled up together. So the 2 trade promotion activities, the International Market Access Grant and Export Tech Support, and what those breakdowns are by the product groups, and then the Export Expansion Grant funding. So that takes us to that 1.87 million roughly total. As you may remember, we have as part of the legislation, it's of the 5 million, 2.5 million is to go to dairy, 1.25 to meat products, 1.25 to crop products. That breaks down roughly to 50, 25%. And we're running right now, based again, snapshot on what's available to us right now at 52% dairy, so a little bit above the 50%, a little bit low on meat, a little bit high on crop to those percentages, but running relatively close. And as we get into number 1, we look to try to plan our activities, do our recruiting so that we are trying to keep that balance. And then as well as we get closer toward the end in the year before, and then the final fiscal year, whether we true up that number through specific events that are around that particular category that might be a bit low. So certainly an opportunity on the meat side. Genetics certainly is strong, but also in the meat product side to be able to, and the hides and furs, for us to be able to see if we're able to help catch that number up in some other areas. So as we continue on with our planning, we do keep an eye on those percentages to make sure that we're aligned with those requirements of the legislation as we go forward. And as you note, so if it's, the goal was $1 million a year, we've taken that appropriation 320, that dairy grant funding, and that's clicked together with this. And certainly looking at those two things in concert to be able to come up to that goal of 2 million in those first 2 fiscal years in terms of the resource spending to do those activities. So we're about $130,000 off of that. As you remember, there was about $77,000 in the dairy export grant funding that will go to international market access grants specific to dairy to occupy that dollar amount. And then as well, the additional roughly $60,000. And then we have activities identified that we'll be able to use under the trade promotion activity category, whether it's later in this year or early, trying to do some of that early work for fiscal 24. And again, in the way the program works, that we go through the budget process and we go through the request for the funding. We have the authorization to spend, but we need the approval to be able to spend the money each fiscal year. So the budget work is, as you know, ongoing right now. And it may not be until whatever point that is through that process in the state to be able to have those funds available. So to be able to have some available now in fiscal 23 to put into 24 to be able to secure our space in some of those activities. This is some of the benefit of being able to do that and occupy some of those funds. So once we know our final numbers, then we'll be able to execute on those activities that we have identified to be able to utilize those. But until we know the true dollars, then we're a little bit careful about what we've committed to or what we're able to do, but just to make sure that we are doing all that we can to utilize every dollar that's available to help the companies grow their exports. And then quickly, we'll take a look at our activity plan for 2024, fiscal 24, that is. And as you'll notice, it's similar shows. I think the approach is to look at existing shows where we know that there's a strong opportunity. These are either global international shows or certainly strongly regional shows where it draws in buyers from a number of countries, not just one. So, and that Anuga show, for example, in Germany, again, the Siam show in Morocco, Gulf Food, which we've done previously, Carrefour, that's a show in France, that's a new one, but that draws from all throughout Europe, certainly, and beyond. So that's not just an opportunity in France, but that the EU is a good market as well for hardwoods, certainly. TIFEX show is new in Thailand and doing some other work to continue to leverage the visit by those Thai buyers that came in this fiscal year to go on to look a bit more into that market. But that also draws from the Southeast Asia region. We're at this point, and those, things can change, but at this point to do a secretary-led mission to Colombia and Chile and South America. And to those markets, those are some of the stronger opportunity markets for us, certainly in a number of the products that we've been talking about, processed packaged food products, as well as genetics and feed. As have been categories other times, the export education seminars, so helping training and development of the exporters in the state and those activities, social media campaign, and that one specifically identified for New Zealand, as we've been doing some work in that market around livestock genetics in that area specifically, and then part of our trade missions and part of our original plan was to partner with WEDC in their trade missions, trade ventures, as they call them, taking their companies to markets. They go to Canada and Mexico every year, China previously every year until COVID lockdowns. And we'll see whether that's an opportunity, but we'll work with them to identify where those best fit markets are. Certainly Mexico is on the short list to consider in as one of those markets to be able to help us push a bit more into our next door neighbor, where we want to make sure we bring that back up. And then again, those international market access grants and export tech scholarships. One point in international market access grants is that those can be a challenge sometimes, I think, to recruit companies for. There's a lot of other activities going on, but also we'll be continuing to work more closely with the companies to make sure that they A, are able to do what they planned, or B, help them to find an alternate activity so they're able to occupy those funds. In our first year, we had a few of those companies that were awarded the grant, but then in going through their plans, either just plain weren't able to utilize the funds at all, or didn't use the funds entirely that were available to them. So to help folks move through that, it's a relatively simple grant process to apply for. There's some documentation work on that, but at the same time, if a company is not used to working with grants, then that can be somewhat of a challenge. So we'll be continuing to work on that. So we make sure that we get the full utilization of those dollars. So that was a bit of a challenge, a learning that we had in this first year that we got them on, but it really is all the way through to get them reimbursed and to utilize the dollars.
So Mark, a question I have, it's been bubbling around the back of my head, is we've got 25% number. Every day it gets closer and closer. So as we're looking at where we invest our time and resources, in your mind, how much of it is, let's go find the low hanging fruit so we can more easily or deliver that number, versus planting trees that we know we need to plant or further down the road? So how do you vision that mix, or where you invest funds and resources?
So a lot of these activities are actually a little bit of both and, because we're recruiting, these trade shows that we're going to.
Right.
If you're a new to market person, then that's an advantage for you, but it's going to take you 3-4 years to get in there. But we're also looking at folks who are experienced exporters who have these markets, and they're looking to get more into the same market or in these international shows to grab a couple more new countries out of that market. So as we're looking at these, there aren't necessarily specific new to export or new to newer, smaller companies.
Right.
It is really a broader mix.
I guess I'm looking more at the where we go and where we bring people from. Is, that to me, that's the critical component of this thing. So once again, I don't know much about the rest of I mean, I've got my own little world of dairy that I kind of look at, but what's your filter on where you go or where you target to bring people in terms of near term, which can be, we had the Thai people come in, and who would have thought that they were like, they're like, how quick can we get some of this stuff rolling? In other places, it takes years. So, I look at Mexico and like, we've already got a lot of stuff there. Should we be pouring more gas on the fire in places like Mexico where it's easier, or plant trees elsewhere? So I don't have the answer, but I think that's one of the things that this group, your group, is obviously charged with.
Absolutely. And I think some of the work we do around that is taking a look at our strongest, when we go through that exercise on the top markets.
Right.
So we're taking a look at, okay, where are the dollars coming from, and not just overall the aggregate, but also by those major product groups.
Right.
And then we identify the shows and the activities that we could do in those markets where we see, for example, that's why you're seeing this activity in Europe for Interzoom for wood, but also in Mexico.
Right.
As we're looking at Southeast Asia in terms of the dairy products and the work that Lisa's been doing in Singapore and in Vietnam and in Thailand. in that market, especially as China softened, frankly, a bit for us in the show in Singapore, isn't it? The food and hotels in Singapore. But when Lisa does that show in Singapore, that isn't just, Singapore's not a bad market, but it's kind of small. In terms of number of people, but look at all the people who come into that. Just like people are going to Vegas, not because Vegas is this fantastic market for all food buyers, but because everyone's coming into one spot for those. So we are looking to that. But I think as well, we're looking for input from certainly you all and your organizations that you might be aligned with to take a look at those and say, hey, I think we should consider this area, or we could do a bit more in that. So as we look at these amounts, and that's some of the idea of looking into 24, and I'll bring up a slide in a second here on 2025 to really then provide the feedback as to, all right, are these tracking with what you're looking at and those opportunity points, and as well, those export expansion grant projects were another approach by organization to be able to say, okay, where are the markets that you're seeing, where are your members talking about that we're then being able to utilize that funding as well on top of the food export funding and some of these others. So we're trying to click those together, but specific to WIAE, since that's some of these other ones, they're chosen by others. But again, US at the Foreign Ag Service level, at USDA, they're also in food export. These others are also taking a look at, okay, what are those top markets, but trying to balance that planting trees versus harvesting fruit. But yeah, it's something that we do take a look at, but I don't know that we have a good figure to say, is it 80-20? Is it 90-10? And again, that's going to depend by industry, by market, by companies participating. But I would say that there's a majority that falls on the side of harvesting fruit as opposed to planting trees, to use
Want to hit those numbers.
So, but I think something we should continue to pay attention to. Fair point.
There's a comment in the chat box too.
Yes, and that Luis had mentioned that FAS, there's certainly we're working on information from them as well. So they wanted to add Luis from the team. So into 2025. So as you notice, there's some similar activities. Thailand again, dairy products, leveraging that group and seeing what we had seen from that market. Certainly Vietnam, is one of those areas as well where we've seen activity. The show in UAE and that's in agriculture. So livestock genetics, feed, supplements, all those activities on the agricultural side. Again, in Morocco, the Siam activity, which we're seeing great opportunity there. And, Chad, to your point, Morocco is something that's more of planting seeds. But we've also identified that it's not just, casting them anywhere. Is the ground fertile, to extend the metaphor? And in that case, we're getting the FAS has
That's a
identified that
great place
market.
to be planting a tree.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Absolutely. A lot of, they're looking for production, but they're also looking for finished product from us. So they're doing theirs more for fluid milk and maybe for powdered milk. Those finished cheese products are still opportunities for us in that market. And we notice that if we come in from one area like that, then oftentimes we're able to add into that because we have the entry, we have the awareness in the market, and they're motivated to look away from Europe, where they traditionally been with France, right? So Gulf food, again, just because that's such a huge regional show or international show, but certainly around that Middle East region, South Asia. And then Carrefour in France, again, the Wood Show, China Dairy Expo, which has been traditionally a strong show. That one, we've been actually ongoing, even though you can't travel there. That's worked, at least up to this point, with people who are existing distribution in the market. And hopefully when the market opens up, then folks who, right now it's existing business and growing that, as opposed to bringing somebody else who wants to grow into the market. So ideally, if it opens back up in fiscal 25, then we're able to benefit from that, but as well, just those companies who are already there to help them grow that business. It's early stage planning, but we did some work in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, as we talk about Morocco, that's not East Africa, but still that's an opportunity point, but we'll continue to assess whether that's the appropriate location as we get closer to that. I mean, fiscal 25 is yet a ways out for us, but at least to put a marker, and then we'll begin to look. But that's where we also look for input, because again, some of that, using the benefit of having the meetings, the visibility of having a secretary to travel with us, then to be able to make the best use of those, because that's partly promotion of the industry overall, but also specifically sales for the companies that are traveling. So look for that input as we go forward. Social media campaign around dairy genetics, specifically around that. And that's not really TikTok. What we're talking about is web-based activities, geolocating and some of those things that help to drive that awareness and understanding and information around what's available for those specific industries. So not quite the same as consumer product work. And then again, we'll look to it in that fiscal year, identified two of the trade. Again, it says missions, but trade ventures is the term WDC uses. A trade mission is when a governor, elected official goes with a governor, lieutenant governor, travels with them. Not to say that we wouldn't be part of that as well as a food and ag track on those missions, but those are yet to be determined, certainly. But at least to put a placeholder in that's an activity we'll look to bolt on with WIA funds specific to the food and agriculture companies that would go on that. They already do bring food companies and agricultural companies, certainly food processors, and then as well some food producers on some of their other ventures, but to be more intentional about a specific track for food and ag and utilizing those WIA funds to be able to do that. And then again, of course, the international market access grants and the Export Tech program to make good use of that funding. Again, that Export Tech support is specific for agricultural producers. And with that, I believe that
I'm here, Mark.
Okay, great. Aaron Zitzelsberger. Couldn't tell if it was you or Katie might be online.
No.
So I'll introduce Aaron Zitzelsberger from WEDC, who will talk a bit about their trade ventures that are planned and yet to be announced, but at least talk through that a bit. So,
sure. Yeah, no, and apologies. I know you were probably expecting to see my boss, Katie Sinnott, here, and unfortunately she got called away. So apologies for having to be the last minute and having to settle for me. But I know Secretary, I've actually been on Mark since I had a meeting this morning in Fond du Lac, and so I was on the road, but I was able to join from the very beginning. So it's been an enjoyable meeting to be part of. So I know Secretary Romanski had to leave, but to him and the other committee members, thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Zitzelsberger. I'm Director of Global Trade and Investment with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So on behalf of Secretary Hughes and again, my boss, Katie Sinnott, I just wanted to extend our welcome to you as well today. I know it's coming at the end, but still welcome. Mark, just to cover a couple of things in short order. I know Mark had a slide earlier that introduced his team, and I just wanted to note, we also have a team that focuses on international trade. I think you probably got this information early on, maybe last year. We don't do it by sector, we do it by geographic region, but we have 4 market development directors that cover different regions of the area or different regions of the world. Francisco Carrillo, who handles Mexico and Central South America, Spain and Portugal, Fan Fu Lee, who handles our Asian markets, Rome Router, who handles Europe and UK, and then for Chad Hoffman, who handles a wonderful hodgepodge of companies from Canada to Australia to India and Africa. So he's all over the place. So we have our team of market development directors that are a good point of contact for companies that have initial questions. They can be there, and like I said, a great first contact. We also have a network of trade representatives in over 90 countries and territories around the world. These are not state employees. These are contractors that we contract with. They are in-country representatives. So they are very well versed in what is going on in those markets. And so if issues arise and that we can't necessarily answer, that is something that we can always direct them to our in-country trade representatients. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and we can certainly get you. Our team is on the website that you're seeing right now, but we're going to talk just real briefly about our trade ventures. And so, as you can imagine, it's an exciting and challenging time, but in the world of international trade. But I'm, as you've heard in this meeting, we're all happy to report, as you obviously know, that Wisconsin exports continue to grow and even achieve record levels. That's fantastic. WEDC's international trade team is in the process of concluding a very robust international trade venture schedule from 2022 to 2023. We completed in-person trade ventures to Korea, Canada, Mexico, as well as England and Scotland. In addition, we completed virtual trade ventures to both Israel and Australia and New Zealand. And then lastly, we are wheels up momentarily on our final trade venture or multi-sector trade venture to Vietnam and Thailand, which actually they will be taking off in a matter of days. And then we will conclude in June with a delegation of companies to the Paris Air Show. So we have a lot going on right now. You can also see one on your screen right now to the Netherlands and Belgium, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. So our trade ventures have traditionally been very multi-sector in nature. We haven't been industry specific. So it's really not very uncommon for, as Mark just mentioned, that for Wisconsin food and agriculture producers, as well as food processing companies, to participate in our trade ventures. I think Chippewa Valley Bean mentioned just a little while ago that they've been on a trade venture for us, or I think they have been on and maybe are going on a future one as well, which is fantastic. I think it was Lisa also mentioned Croy Valley Foods. I was on the trade venture with them. We just got back about a month ago from our trade venture to Mexico. And I think they had a really successful time down there. So that was great to have them. So we often do get a variety of food and ag companies coming on our trade ventures already. So, as we always talk about, whether companies are looking for customers or distributors, or, to help with their global reach, or potentially both, really our targeted trade ventures are going to help them build those relationships necessary to increase their international sales. So companies get a high-level country briefing from our market development directors before commencing a really well-organized tour of the country's major markets. At each stop, they're going to participate in pre-arranged, customized meetings with companies whose needs and capabilities align with what they're trying to do from an export objective. The purpose of our trade ventures is to get companies in country, because as we all know, there's nothing like boots on the ground. So, and I would say, while we all pivoted to a virtual kind of world during COVID, it's been really fantastic to get back in country. I just got back from Canada just last week, and it was great to be there as well and have people be in the room and shaking hands and doing product demonstrations and building those relationships in person. I don't think there's a better way to do it. So exciting to be out and traveling again and doing that. So, so on the trade ventures, companies are, we aim to try to get them anywhere between 3 to 5 meetings per day to meet their objectives. Sometimes 5 can be awfully hard to do, especially in major markets like Mexico City or places like that, where from a transportation and logistics standpoint, it's just really hard. But we're certainly going to try to pack that schedule as full as we can for every company that's on the trade ventures. And that, whether looking to meet with distributors or buyers or representatives, our trade representatives and our market development directors are going to work with them with the support of our marketing and events team to arrange everything for the companies to ensure that they can focus on the business objectives while in country. So we don't want them having to worry about whether they have interpreter services or that they have transportation from point A to point B to C, D, and E, and F during their day. We want to take care of all that logistics, making sure they have everything they need so they can focus on why they're there, which is doing business and growing their business. So I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits to a WEDC trade venture is all of that logistical help that we provide. Another great thing, I think it was already mentioned here, is the peer-to-peer sharing that takes place among participants. I loved sitting when we were in Mexico with 5 companies, hearing them talk. These are companies that weren't even necessarily anywhere near the same kind of industry, but they find those commonalities and those common avenues and what's going well, what's not going well, and to be able to get a week's worth of that is really very, very valuable for them. So, yeah. So, again, we just finished up our very robust schedule. We're going to continue to work with Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection on DATCAP on our Wisconsin Initiative for Ag Exports. And we look forward to another productive year in 2023, 2024. We are currently building out our schedule. And Mark mentioned this, we always do Mexico. We always do Canada. Pre-COVID, we were always doing China. I think we're all trying to find and figure out when is the appropriate time to get back to China. We're certainly looking at that for our schedule next year. It just depends. We haven't finalized anything yet as far as what the schedule will ultimately be. But we are currently building that out. I can say that Mexico and Canada will certainly be on there. And as Mark mentioned, we're looking to utilize the WIAE funds to really be very purposeful and intentional about engaging with Wisconsin agriculture. So building out those ag tracks is going to be very important to us. Just to mention, as we start to build out our schedule, it may look a little bit different than how we have done things in previous years. As I mentioned, our trade ventures have traditionally been very multi-sector. We may take 5 to 8 companies of all different sectors, and I think we will continue to do some very multi-sector trade ventures. But we're also going to look at doing things. Some may be more industry specific. Some may be focused around a major trade show. Could be a food show where we're partnering with DATCAP. We might try to continue to incorporate elements of virtual trade shows and things like that. So, we're really trying to broaden our overall strategy with our trade ventures, make them as accessible as we can, but also where it makes sense to be very specific, like I said, around maybe a major trade show, and be industry specific. We will look to do that as well. We're also going to try to expand our trade venture outreach by partnering with other organizations, potentially like the U.S. Commercial Service or the Council of Great Lakes Governors and Premiers, and partner with them on their trade venture programs that allows us to grow and just be do a little bit more. So we're going to continue to do that. Like I said, as part of the WIAE, WEDC will work with DATCAP to build out those ag tracks in the appropriate trade venture. As Mark mentioned, those preliminary discussions have already begun. Of course, we're going to continue to recruit Wisconsin ag companies and producers for our trade ventures. We're going to continue to cross promote and recruit for DATCAP's international trade events, which you just got the long list of, which is fantastic. So we will continue to do that. In addition, we're going to continue with our partnership with DATCAP as we incorporate the WIAE funds into our International Market Access Grant. I'm excited about that to see how that's growing, and I think we're going to continue to do great things there, and exciting to continue to work with programs and your international events through the SBA STEP grant and other avenues. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of balls in the air, but it's a great partnership, and we continue to look forward to what lies ahead. So I can't really give you much more in terms of our trade ventures for next year, because it's not finalized yet. But like I said, you can count on Mexico, you can count on Canada, and I would say you can count on Germany. There's just a few others that I think we're still in the process of finalizing right now, but that should be, we're able to announce that in the coming, probably in the next coming month or so. So with that, Mark, that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Aaron. And I know you guys are still working to finalize those. And so the next opportunity for us to get together, we'll be able to see your finalized list, and we can certainly share this with the group once it comes out. One point to make is, as WDC is looking to maybe do a few more that are a little bit more industry focused.
Yep.
And certainly that agriculture, you think about World Dairy Expo and the fact that there's feed, there's equipment, there's genetics, there are a number of things. As we look at some of these shows, that is one example of an area where if we pulled together and did a trade show / venture around that, so it's going out to see some customers, but also meeting them in place, so that WDC would recruit the equipment company, the systems, and we would be recruiting the livestock and genetics and feeds. That's an example of how we would work on doing that.
I think that's exactly what we have in mind. Yep.
So, and then some of that works in the food shows as well, right? The folks who do the packaging, some of the processing equipment, as well as the actual food products. And oftentimes in those food shows, there's not as much of that crossover as there is on some of the others, but there's still some of those opportunities.
Yeah, and as we've been exploring that, it's we've had a lot of discussions with our trade reps in places like Mexico too around, there's always a myriad of food shows and things to go to, and where can we find that one that maybe balances, food and ag with food processing equipment and things like that, because we actually do see a fair amount of that of interest on trade ventures from food processing equipment in those avenues. So, hopefully we can find, we just have to find that right trade show, and I think that's very possible.
Great. Well, thanks, Aaron. We do appreciate, the fact that we been able to work together on the International Market Access Grant, and as well that STEP grant that comes out of Small Business Administration channels to you all, and the slice of that pie that you share with us in order to be able to, again, access those federal funds to work together with the state funds to be able to then do those trade promotion activities. So that's important now and continues on.
Well, it's I won't say much more. I will just say that as my father is a soybean farmer, my partnership with DATCAP's important. I take it personally, and it's a privilege to continue to work with everybody. And I look forward to doing more with WIAE. I love we can incorporate that into everything that we're doing.
Excellent. Great. Thanks a lot, Aaron. And obviously we'll be in touch frequently here.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. All right. And that's the URL here for those trade ventures that come up. And then obviously, if you get a hold of one of us, you're talking to all of us. So if there's a question about where they're going, what they're doing, we can certainly connect you with. All right.
For expansion.
Should we
Say again?
chat?
There are two more that came up. So it was had to do. Bob had to take off a little bit. There was actually from an earlier comment from Luis that Morocco. A point about Morocco is not just Morocco. It's a gateway into certainly the northwest part of Africa. That it's a conduit into that part of the continent. So a little bit like what Belgium and Netherlands does for Europe, Morocco does for that region of Africa. So it's not just that one country. Important point to make. I think the next step here is just the calendar of what's coming up for us in our informational webinars. So
yeah, we talked with Charles earlier about possible dates for upcoming informational webinars. So we've selected these dates and then some, just, put in a topic. We can always add or replace these topics, but August 16th, we'll do an overview of the Export-Tech program, either by WMEP out of Milwaukee or the MOC out of UW Stout, so that everybody gets kind of an overview of Export-Tech, and that'd be a great time for Charles to talk about his experience there. November 15th, Charles will be speaking on environmentally sustainable guidance. I'm not sure I've got the ESG correct.
Environment, social governance.
Thank you. Thank you. As it pertains to sustainability, we think this is an important topic for everyone.
Just so everyone knows, I'm looking to bring in representatives from the banking and insurance industries to talk about how important this is to them, what that can mean for your rates and everything else.
Great. In December 13th, also doing a recap for the export expansion grants, and we can also put in another topic into that meeting as well. And then January 17th for another recap meeting for the expansion grants, and we can again add another topic into that informational webinar. And we've set the next Export Advisory Council meeting is September 6th. And I know that's right after Labor Day, but based on our schedule here at DATCP, we can't, it's really difficult for us to even schedule something beyond that first week of September because our staff is involved in so many different things, as well as going through October. So sorry about that, but put a pin in it for you.
Great. Next, we have election of office. We did future topics. Any other ideas besides what we just looked at for webinars and whatnot?
To recap those, it's the ERS report that will come out in November or October. We can do a recap of that in one of the later webinars. The other thing was the food regulations, having someone from Brussels to recap some things that came up.
Just a thought on topics too. I know there's also SBA program for federal level, and maybe sometime it might be worth having some sort of discussion of how could those be tied together with what's available from DATCP.
Thank you, Keith. Anybody else have any other ideas?
Success stories are always good, whether they're small companies or large companies. Doesn't have to be in heavy detail, just surface levels of experience. Like just even your quick mentioning of your leading by example earlier is just intriguing, right? Like,
Excellent, Kevin, thank you. I'm sure we can find any number of those through our group.
sure.
This is probably country driven, not just in general.
Do we want to have a conversation again about trying to improve our transportation system for our exports?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Lou. I would push that one back until we've talked about this. Let's think about that once the Great Lakes shipping season has really gotten underway, or perhaps a recap at the end of that. Because there's a number of things happening at the state, federal, and even company level and trying to utilize those ports more, especially when it comes to the spending of money on new ports and things like that, facilities.
I think, Larry, you're looking at rail as well, right?
Rail. Huge percentage of our exports is done by rail to the ports. And it's a frustrating situation.
Understood. And I think, quite honestly, as we talked about during our break, that it's something as the council should look at more deeply besides a webinar level. And I think we'll look for the DATCP group to try and set something up with Commerce on that, so we can work together and see what we can do.
So you're thinking more of like a session kind of thing, or?
Well, working, I hate this term,
Yeah.
working group,
Okay.
task force.
Yeah. Something with us, the rail, Department of Transportation, economic development, industry, focused on some good ideas, perhaps think outside the box, lower our general transportation costs significantly.
Okay.
Okay. Without any other ideas? Great ideas, by the way, everybody. We will move on to the election of chair and vice chair.
Before we do that, is there any of the ideas in chat? There's a
No,
bunch of chat stuff.
I've been
Okay.
monitoring the chat.
Okay, just want.
I have one, this is Jackie with the ginseng industry. I think it would be interesting to have a webinar on barriers to trade. Ginseng has a lot of barriers to trade, specifically with China, and it doesn't seem like there is an appetite on either side of the house to resume trade with China. So it might be interesting to have sort of a discussion on what are the barriers to trade that all of the different groups face, and have they been overcome by any groups, and what groups have overcome their barriers to trade to maybe help share with industries that are experiencing barriers to trade but don't really have any solutions for those barriers at the moment.
Good idea. As somebody who's experienced a great many barriers to trade over the last 5 years, that it's close to home.
For your solutions.
There were no solutions. Sorry.
So yeah, that's good point. Thanks for jumping in, Jackie. For those folks online, you know, I should just really open up the little picture again. It's a little bit easier when you see folks. I don't know why it doesn't. There we go. So if anybody else online has a topic. Great. And I've been looking at chat here, so that's all clear of that. So with this, we'll introduce Sharon Hennis. The last thing she's doing with us before she moves out east, we'll do our election of chair and vice chair.
So right now, I'd like to call for nominations. Nominations do not require seconds, and you can nominate yourself. We will start with the position of chair. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I nominate Chad.
Any other nominations?
Charles, you're not interested?
Thank you, but no. At some point in the future.
And Chad, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Any last call for any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Chad being chair?
Aye.
Any-
Do we want the people online to?
We do. Do we
vocalize?
have everybody online too that's a member of the council?
Aye.
That was Jackie.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Chad.
Thank you.
Now I will call for nominations for vice chair.
Keith, would you be interested?
I'd be willing to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other nominations for vice chair? Last call for nominations for vice chair. All in favor of Keith being vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Congratulations, Keith. And your secretary is Lisa. So you do not need to vote for her.
Great. Well, any final words from the exiting chair?
Yeah, I can say a few words. Thank you, Chad and Keith, for stepping up and for this next year. I hope you have as much fun as I did. It's been an interesting journey, and I hope that as we move forward, we can still work as a group to get on goal. You know, this year's been good for Wisconsin agriculture. And even though with that dire prediction from USDA, let's see if we can't keep Wisconsin on a productive track. You know, I had that information early. That's why I'm getting off. No. So, you know, I'm happy to stay on the council and to contribute how I can, and I'm here for any questions. So with that, I think we'll move to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, actually. Chad, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Craig. All in favor of the motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries. This meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Congratulations.